From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's late on Wednesday night, March 1st, 2023, as we bring you a new podcast episode. We'll be recapping the White Sox week so far during spring training. Again, the disclaimer, it's very early in spring training, but some players have caught our attention early and are worth tracking along this month. One player getting a lot of playing time has been Jake Burger, and we'll try to guess why that's the reason for the White Sox. Plus, an idea from a premiership team in England that maybe professional American sports teams want to try, in particular, the White Sox, to help improve relations between the organization and fans. We'll chime on that later in the show. But first, I need to get something off my chest, and here to hear my rant is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. And Jim, I apologize, my friend, but you need to hear this. Everybody needs to hear this. I'm not sure why I'm angry, but what is the point if you own half of a regional sports network and you can't broadcast or stream every spring training game that you have? And where's my baseball savant data? Where is it? It's 2023, man. I know that you have it. I know you got TrackMan.
What's the deal?
What's the deal?
What's the deal with the baseball savant data?
I need it, dadgummit. So those are my two points. Why are there such few streams for the White Sox during spring training? And where's the StatCast data?
Yeah, no, I think it's just, cost cutting on NBC Sports Chicago part, or at least not cost cutting because they've never really broadcast a ton of spring training games. It's just cost avoiding. And given how many other teams do the same, it doesn't necessarily surprise me. Like the webcasts, the humble webcasts we used to watch, like people would complain about the quality and like, who's Russ Langer? Why is he calling games? But, having seen other teams broadcast slates or lack thereof, I was like, don't knock the webcast, man. Like, just, it's just good. Like, it's better than nothing. And sure enough, now we're seeing, it's weird. They have this like video sharing setup, like kind of like park feeds that I think a lot of teams are using for MLB.com video highlights and, maybe B-roll or like, clips that, NBC Sports, or not NBC, like NBC Sports segments can use, or ABC News, CBS, local affiliates can use. And it's not the same. It's not the same when you only see the highlights, like when you want to see how, if somebody goes 0 for 4, or I should say 0 for 3 in spring training, usually there's no 0 for 4, but like, how bad of an 0 for 4 was it? Like, how bad were the swings? If somebody got hit around, like, what were they throwing? Even if it's like a case where you don't have StatCast data, just like, how did hitters look? Did hitters look, just were they location mistakes, or was it just like pitcher had nothing? So, that's kind of what I miss about not having even the webcast. So everybody, whoever knocked the webcast and said the White Sox, like it's cheap and shoddy and Bush League, like take it back. I miss those webcasts.
Me too, man. Me too. It's odd. It's like, hey, how are the White Sox doing in spring training? Hard to tell, honestly, other than what we've seen on NBC Sports Chicago or what we picked up from other teams' feeds if you have an MLB.TV account. And I do now because as a full season ticket holder, I did not know this. This is one of the perks of being a Major League Baseball full season ticket holder is that you get a year subscription to MLB.TV. You pretty much pay for it with your ticket plan. They like to pitch it as a gift, but there I could watch the other spring training games when the White Sox are on those feeds, but they haven't been the last couple of days, and I feel like I'm missing out. And if I miss it on the stream, well, if I had at least the StatCast data to provide more insight on how guys are throwing and how hard that they're hitting and what pitches that they may be struggling with, so we could track their progression during camp, don't even have that. So whatever. Mm-hmm. You know what? Forget you guys.
Well, yeah. Salt River Fields has it, and that's the only park I think in the Cactus League, that's the only park that has ever had it. Like they were the first park to get it, and I thought, oh, at least one park's got it, they'll expand it, and they've never expanded. To my knowledge, I think that's the only park that has it.
So do the Grapefruit League teams, do those sites have more of the Baseball Savant data?
I thought it was kind of similar, but there's so little overlap with the Grapefruit League teams, storylines and such. That's one thing I like about spring training is like, it does remind me of like the old American League, National League setup where like Hawk Harrelson would never know anything about the National League. And for the most part, he didn't have to. It's kind of the same thing with like Grapefruit League. Like, hey, Chris Sale is going to throw a spring training game. I had no idea what Chris Sale was up to or what he's doing. Like just, could focus on 14 teams and only those 14 teams and have a general sense of, the Padres adding yet another guy to the roster. They're 45-man, 26-man roster. I appreciate those things, because it's nice to have the schedule whittled down for you and rather simplified.
Well, the Grapefruit League's been weird. You had the Atlanta-Boston game ends on a pitch clock violation and the game ties. And was it the Orioles and Pirates kept playing without umpires? Like they wanted to play the bottom of the ninth inning. The umpires left, but the players stayed on and kept playing. The Grapefruit League's been a more weird than the Cactus League, which I'm a bit jealous of.
Yeah. Although, I think that must be a testament to the pitch clock. It's like, we didn't play enough baseball, more baseball, which I think is always, a good feeling. Like if they leave you wanting more and they feel like the impulse to give you more, like that's kind of cool. So pitch clock, pretty fun so far, I think.
I agree. Speaking of Salt River Fields, as you mentioned, that facility does have StatCast data. So we do have some StatCast data when the Chicago White Sox played there on Tuesday. And they won that game 4-1 over the Arizona Diamondbacks. And pulling from the notes as far as that data, Eloy Jimenez had 2 batted balls with an exit velocity greater than 100 miles per hour. He's been swinging really well. He's 4 for 8 in spring training with 2 walks, no strikeouts. So that's a really good sign to see as he'll be joining the team on Dominican Republic for the World Baseball Classic soon. Luis Robert had a double, and that was a bomb. It traveled like 427 feet at dead center field. Sevi Zavala's home run was also a bomb, traveling 410 feet with an exit velocity greater than 108 miles per hour. Jonathan Stever, he's coming back from a lat injury. He threw more sliders than fastballs. He threw 9 sliders to 6 fastballs. His 4-seam fastball averaged 91.5 miles per hour. So it's a bit concerning with the velocity because that's 40 grade in today's baseball for right-handed pitchers. And this is someone that we recall, now it's been a few years ago when Stever joined the White Sox farm system. He kind of broke out where, hey, this is a guy that's throwing like 96 miles per hour and it's a power fastball with a power slider. He could be a dark horse to join the White Sox rotation. And he may help start some games with Charlotte, but if this velocity doesn't increase, he's not going to be much help for the White Sox.
Or Charlotte.
That's true. Or Charlotte.
Yeah.
But this is where having this type of data for Baseball Savant helps because it can encourage conversations. We can point out some things that we're seeing in the data that's worthwhile to follow along for the rest of the month. It keeps us paying attention to spring training. When you're not streaming games and you're not putting out Baseball Savant data, I guess see you on opening day. Like that's just kind of how I feel.
Yeah. I mean, like today, I looked at the MLB TV schedule, saw that the game wasn't available on either feed, no audio. So it's like I went to teach curling for a little bit, just like, may as well make some extra money while it's there. But yeah, Stever, going back to him, like one thing I noticed, like going through prospect list and such is just like lat strains seem like, I'm curious about the lat strain as an injury. Like Tyler Johnson had one, wasn't quite the same. Luke Schilling had like the Jake Peavy one and then he bounced back, but then he had Tommy John surgery.
That just hurts my shoulder thinking about it.
Yeah. And then, Stever had it and he was supposed to be ready by last spring training, or he was supposed to be somebody who could maybe not a fully participating in spring training, but should be ready to pitch an affiliated ball by April or May. And he didn't pitch until the last week of the season. And now he's coming back and throwing 91, 92. It's just I don't think he's it doesn't seem like he's a guy anymore. I mean, he wasn't really a guy the last year he was fully functional. Cause like he was somebody who was interesting when he like sat 93, 94 and hit 96. And then the last year he was healthy, like he was topping out 94, but kind of like 92. And now he's like 91 and just, could be a case where like it was just, he peaked early and couldn't quite put it together. And the slider, it's like, I never thought that was that good of a pitch to be a primary thing. Like he was more fastball curveball. And now the slider's kind of coming along and I'm thinking that's kind of like throwing stuff against the wall to see if there's anything that can help him get back on track. But yeah, the lat strain is something I've noticed be more prevalent with pitchers now, like maybe not shoulder, maybe not elbow, or maybe they're found some mechanics that take the stress off those parts, but now the lat's in the middle taking the beating. Like, I don't know. So, just that's something I'm more sensitive to though, reading, these prospect reports and such, thinking like, next time a lat strain pops up, I'm going to like add, 2 weeks of the timetable from there and then see what happens.
Could be a red flag. I mean, all the pitchers that you've named at one point seem like, hey, these could be guys that could reach the major leagues and be, helping the White Sox, be contributors for the team. And they're struggling to get to the majors. And maybe this injury is far more significant than what was once thought of just, this is a lat strain. They may miss a month, but they'll be back to missing a lot more time than expected, and they are losing velocity. So it was a bit disappointing to see that type of data from Jonathan Stiever, but we'll see how the rest of the month works out for him, and maybe he could regain some ticks of velocity on his fastball. He'll need it because, again, as we mentioned a few podcasts ago, the average velocity for a right-handed pitcher with a four-seam fastball now is 94 miles per hour. So that's the average. That's what we consider 50 grade. Right now, Jonathan Stiever's got about a 40 grade fastball that's not going to cut it in the major leagues. So from an offensive standpoint, moving away from my rant about the lack of streams and lack of data in Baseball Savant, from an offensive standpoint, Eloy Jimenez, Yohan Moncada, Tim Anderson, Luis Robert Jr., they're getting a lot of the at-bats early in spring training. And that makes sense because very shortly here, they're going to be leaving the White Sox and joining the respective World Baseball Classic squads. I believe Moncada and Robert, they have to travel to Taiwan for their first game as Cuba takes on the Netherlands in 6 days. So they play March 7th, Cuba and the Netherlands.
That's a neutral site.
Taiwan. Yeah.
For the firing up the long dormant Netherlands-Cuba rivalry. Got to get them as far away from those two countries as possible.
So those four, obviously, they're getting a lot of reps because Pedro Grifol and the White Sox coaches, they're not going to see these guys until the end of the month. Or maybe they'll see them when they rejoin the White Sox as they make their way to Houston, if their respective countries do really well in the World Baseball Classic. Oscar Colas, he's getting a lot of at-bats. Makes sense. Grifol wants to see as much as possible to gauge if Colas is ready to join the 26-man roster on opening day and to be the primary right fielder. Then there's Jake Burger. And Jake Burger already has 2 home runs this spring, which is great. But he's tied for the team lead of 11 at-bats, along with Oscar Colas. And I bring this up because I'm a bit surprised that we're seeing a lot of Jake Burger early. We're seeing a lot of Jake Burger at first base. I don't think we've seen him at third base. Is there an angle that I'm not thinking about here, Jim, with the amount of playing time that Burger's getting early in camp?
I think there are a few angles. None of them like strike me as like the obvious one. Like one could be just a case where like there's a chance he fits on a bench. There's a chance that he's somebody who can be some right-handed pop, especially like say if they carry Leury Garcia or Romy Gonzalez or both Garcia and Gonzalez. Like you can really have a single-use player. Like it's like one of those single-use kitchen implements. Like you can have like Burger there, just right-handed power, and if he has to stand in the field, I guess it'll be first base. And same thing like Billy Hamilton. Like you can have Billy Hamilton be somebody who can drive pitchers nuts with the pickoff rules and the pitch clock, and be just somebody who you can really frustrate. Especially like younger pitchers or who maybe weren't in spring training and didn't really have a sense of the rhythms of the game. So I mean, like you can have those guys if you have 2 position players or like in Garcia and Gonzalez like covering 6-7 positions between them, like basically everything but catcher between them. So like, may as well give them a shot. So that's one. Another could be like if they're setting up there are some maybe talks about a spring trade, given that Berger is, fairly blocked from anything more significant from what he's already doing. Maybe if Andrew Vaughn gets hurt and he hasn't been the most durable of players, like he hasn't missed time, but he also has had like he's been banged up in a lot of different ways or limited in a lot of ways. Like, maybe Berger plays first, but otherwise, like, if Aloys has to fight for outfield time, then there's really no place for Berger. Like it comes down to that basically. So like, it could be a case where just, he hits the ball hard. There are some things to like about him, some things to not like about him. And maybe they're just trying to see like how strong his strengths are. And maybe other teams are interested in seeing the same thing. And maybe they can have some kind of change of scenery deal where the White Sox get somebody who fits on their roster a little bit better, who's also blocked in their organization. So those are kind of the two things I think, unless like, they're just really wary about Colas maybe not breaking camp. And then all of a sudden DH is a Gavin Sheets, Jake Berger type thing. And maybe they're evaluating just what happens if Colas isn't quite ready for opening day.
On the trade idea, and there's been some that suggested that, I just don't see a lot of teams interested trading for Jake Berger unless if their starting first baseman got hurt, which we'll talk about a pretty significant injury for one of the World Series contenders this year in a moment in this podcast. I just don't see that route. I guess I would be very surprised if another team picked up the phone and said, what would it take to get Jake Berger? Because clearly he's blocked on your team, but we may have a need for right-handed power. And clearly he's got right-handed power. I mean, he's already flexed it during spring training camp. And I'm not complaining that Jake Berger's getting all these at-bats. It just surprised me. It's been a lot of Jake Berger early. Am I missing something here? Should we be more seriously talking about him joining the 26-man roster? And I tweeted that. And that was a good conversation for many involved in that thread. If you keep Sebi Zavala and you have either Lurie Garcia or Romy Gonzalez as your super utility, does a Gavin Sheets and Jake Berger fit on your bench for the Chicago White Sox? Some say yes, because the White Sox need as much power as possible. Some don't feel comfortable with that because they don't like the defensive abilities with Sheets or Berger. And I get that as well. So it's an interesting conversation when it comes to Jake Berger. And if this playing time continues, I'm just going to have this lingering thought in my head. Should I take Jake Berger more seriously in making this 26-man roster? But watch, in the last week or two of spring training, his playing time evaporates. And that's when we see a lot more Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets as the season quickly approaches.
Could be. Yeah. Maybe they just really like the mustache.
It's an okay mustache. Dylan Cease has got a fantastic mustache. Jake Berger, I don't know, man. Like, it's not very full. He needs to work on the thickness of the mustache. It takes time, though, and a lot of practice.
Well, I mean, like, or just, it's, some mustaches are better than others. I think Danny Mendick is probably the leader for like the, just kind of like the professional, like Selleck grade mustache. I think he's the guy. C second, Berger distant third. It's not bad. Like he's kind of like, his name's Berger. Like, he's kind of a roly poly type build. So I think like, the mustache works. It adds to the whimsy, like, which I think, he has going for him.
I believe Jose Valentin had the best mustache in White Sox history. Is that fair? It's in contention.
Yeah. I mean, definitely of like this century.
Okay. I'll take that. And watch, this is going to be a Ted Sporkle quiz. All of the White Sox players that sported a mustache over the years.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there are any.
Oh, man.
I mean, I imagine like the 70s had some, and here's where.
Oh, I'm sure. Chet Lemon.
Oh, here's like Oscar Gamble had one.
Oh yeah, Oscar Gamble.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think like, but in terms of like the handlebar phase or anything like that, not quite sure. But I'm sure like some of our listeners and readers from those days can fill in the gaps.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some early surprises. Is there anyone that's caught your attention early in camp, Jim, that may be worth a follow?
I think it's kind of the usual suspects so far. I will say, like, Romy Gonzalez made a nice catch in left field, which, he can play the outfield. He just hasn't played much of it. So I think if they're going to build up his skill set, that would be there's more time in the outfield than in the infield, assuming Moncada and Anderson are healthy. So like that kind of opened my eyes a little bit, seeing like the range in left, especially since we're talking about, Jake Marisnick having a rough start. Billy Hamilton missed one on the track. Tough catch, but just like you hope that a Hamilton great defender who doesn't really hit well can flag down like a leaping catch on the warning track. Kind of like the Adam Engel, the standards he set for himself. Hamilton's kind of dealing with the same thing. But I think, the Romy plays, is what jumped out to me. I think this week, with guys missing the time for the World Baseball Classic, will be like the case for like Lenin Sosa, Jose Rodriguez. Let's see what they have up the middle. Mm-hmm. In the corner spots, like it's going to be an open competition with Colas and Marisnick, and probably see a lot more of Romy out there. So I think this is going to be the week where, kind of opposite of normal spring trainings, where like the first spring training is open auditions and NRIs and the minor leaguers who are not in big league camp but get called up to fill in some time. Because of the World Baseball Classic, that kind of gets pushed back, I think, to this week, where it's, see who impresses, see whose name we didn't count on. And right now, I think from what I've seen, that's been a case of just like, it's been pretty standard. Oscar Colas, though, looking okay so far. Like his first at bat scared me. Thinking like, oh no, this is, you see he's swinging 0-1 pitches in the dirt and not even close. And he seems like he's calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, he's 5 for 11. All 5 hits are singles. We've yet to see an extra base hit from Oscar Colas, but so far he's 5 for 11 at spring training, as he's trying to prove his worth to the White Sox coaches. One player that I'm going to be tracking is Lane Ramsey. Now, how well do you know Lane Ramsey? Have you seen Lane Ramsey in action, Jim?
I have not, at least not recently. I think I may have seen him in Birmingham. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Now, actually, I think I'm trying to remember if that was he and Alec Hansen are both like tall and from Oklahoma.
Right. Ramsey's 6'9".
Yeah. So he's taller than Alec Hansen. So I've always kind of lumped him. I think I saw Hansen in that 13 walk inning I saw. So I did not see Ramsey there, to my knowledge, but no, I haven't seen him recently to where like he was on a major league radar at that point.
Got it. Yeah. So Ramsey's control has been an issue ever since he was in Oklahoma. And last year with Charlotte, 21 strikeouts, 17 walks, and 20 in the third innings. So strikeout total's all right. The walk total, not so much. But on Tuesday, in his spring training action, he hit 97 with his fastball. He was sitting at 95.5 miles per hour. So that's above average for velocity. The slider and cutter, they were getting good spins. He was averaging 2,500 RPMs as he struck out 3 and 2 scoreless innings for the White Sox in spring training. Something I'm going to be tracking for the rest of the spring, because it is an intriguing reliever type, possibly at 6'9". But I'm also paying attention to see what adjustments the White Sox make, because they've got another 6'9" pitcher that they just drafted in the first round in Noah Schultz. And I'm curious to see anything that they apply to Ramsey is what they could be possibly working on with Schultz to try to repeat that delivery over and over and over again. Ramsey, bullpen arm. There's no hope being a starter. With Schultz, they're going to be hoping that they could develop him into a starting pitcher with that type of body build, which is very difficult. You had Keith Law on our show a couple weeks ago. The deck is stacked against the White Sox as far as odds of Noah Schultz turning into a star pitcher just because of the build. A lot of tall pitchers don't make it to the majors. Yes, we know about Chris Sale. Yes, we know about Randy Johnson, but there's a lot of guys that were at that type of height that just did not have staying power. So for those reasons, I'm going to keep an eye on Lane Ramsey to see if he continues to improve control-wise, because we know Charlotte needs pitchers. And if he leaves camp here, he's 26 years old, but with the amount of injuries the White Sox projected to have for this upcoming year, especially in the bullpen, who knows? Maybe he's someone that we do see in Chicago this upcoming year if he can get his control in order. But that's the first item of business. He needs to stop walking guys. So those are some people that we're going to be following. It'll be great to hear on who you guys are following during spring training camp. You could put those names in the comment section in the podcast post on soxmachine.com. But Jim and I will take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. But coming up next, I'm going to pitch the idea of a fan advisory board after reading such an idea from overseas. The Premiership and the Los Angeles Dodgers suffer a pretty devastating injury. Next on the Sox Machine Podcast. Welcome back to the Sox Machine Podcast. All right, we'll start with the Los Angeles Dodgers breaking news, and not the best of news, as they reported earlier this week that Gavin Lux tore his ACL in his right knee. And if you didn't get a chance to watch the video, if you get squirmish at all, I don't recommend it. As he was running to third base, Jim, it seemed like he hyperextended his right knee, bending in a way that knees do not bend to the side. And, this is a pretty devastating injury for Gavin Lux, because here he is in his mid-20s, and he had quite a bit of run with the Dodgers last year. He had well over 400 plate appearances with the Dodgers. He had 471 to be exact. And he hit 276 with a 346 on base percentage, and he slugged 399. But this was going to be the year. This was going to be the year for Gavin Lux to show his complete worth to the Dodgers, to become an everyday starting player for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And Lux has been very popular with White Sox fans, especially with the offseason plan project, because the White Sox have had this opportunity for a player like Gavin Lux to join the White Sox. Come over, be the second baseman. You bat left-handed. This works out well for everyone. And unfortunately, in 2023, it seems like Lux is going to miss the entire season, Jim.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sliding door scenario to where, like, what if the White Sox did acquire Lux? Like, would he be just having the kind of career that everybody thought, rather than kind of this up and down with the Dodgers being a depth piece, but not really, having the stardom people thought he might have, and now this is seriously going to interfere, and especially with the Dodgers having like a quiet off season and seeming like they're going to roll with what they had, maybe regrouping, maybe getting their luxury tax ducks in a row and then making a bigger play next year. But I think Lux was crucial to them having, success around this retrenching financially. And with him not there, the Dodgers always pull guys out of thin air and always, just attack you with guys who failed in other organizations, and all of a sudden they're throwing strikes or throwing harder or hitting for power and pulling the ball in the air. And so you can't count them out, but it certainly looks like the Padres have really timed their surge well with the way the Dodgers have taken a step back. And sorry to go on a quick revisiting of our discussion of Lane Ramsey. I was trying to think, Alec Hansen, there was another pitcher who was not Lane Ramsey. I looked it up. It was Jake Elliott, who was 6'7" from Oklahoma. So Nick Hostetler definitely had a type. Just as much as he loved guys named Zach and guys from Louisville, he liked really tall pitchers from Oklahoma.
Yeah. Actually, one of the cross-checkers for the White Sox ended up being an assistant coach at Oklahoma. I have to check to see if there's still an assistant coach at Oklahoma. But while Hostetler was the scouting director, one of his cross-checkers became an assistant coach at Oklahoma. So they had some insight of what was going on. But you are right. He did have a type.
Or there's a skimming deal.
Oh, boy. Well, it wouldn't be the first time with the White Sox.
Yes. Anyway, sorry to go back to Lux. The guy I kind of wondered about, and you can't really plant that way, is Elvis Andrus. I wonder what his market would look like if he waited a week. Because that job could have been there for him. Maybe the Dodgers would not have been interested. And, they look at his swing data or, what they know, what they saw, what their scouts might have seen and said, no, we're still not interested. But that was the kind of thing I thought Andrus might have been waiting for, the way Johnny Cueto was able to find a job after Lance Lynn's injury. He seemed well positioned to where any shortstop goes down, he's a godsend, just as we saw with Tim Anderson's injury, just, how well Andrus fit in. And I thought he was waiting for that opportunity. So I think the White Sox are doubly lucky that they got Andrus for second base at the rate they got him for.
Well, best of luck to Gavin Lux in his rehab. Again, I think he's a very talented player, and we'll see what he could do in 2024. But this kind of stinks for Gavin Lux, the player, because this was going to be a good opportunity for him to get 500, maybe 600 plate appearances this year and really make his mark in the major leagues, but that's going to have to wait another year. It's kind of like with Royce Lewis and the Minnesota Twins, being one of the top prospects. He's had 2 torn ACLs, and we may finally get to see Lewis this year for the Minnesota Twins. So some devastating knee injuries for potentially young stars in Major League Baseball that we're just going to have to wait an extra year to see if they can bounce back from these injuries. And hopefully for Gavin Lux, he does meet some of those expectations that White Sox fans have. Or who knows, maybe the White Sox finally do trade for Gavin Lux as his price becomes a lot more affordable in the offseason. I can already sense it in the offseason plans, Jim.
I'm thinking more like when he's 37.
I did see the tweets about the White Sox in 2033 signed Manny Machado to a 1-year deal. And they finally get their man. The saddest thing about that tweet is that 97-year-old Jerry Reinsdorf is ecstatic to sign Manny Machado to a 1-year contract. General manager Rick Hahn,
Yep.
it's like he's still the GM 10 years from now. Oh, man.
Just like waiting out Andrew Benintendi. He's waiting out Manny Machado to come down. He's just Gavin Lux, 37 years old with gray wings on the sides, some salt and pepper in his beard. Like, that's what we're looking at.
They finally get their guys. Yep. Eventually. All right. So we're going to end the show with this particular item. And it caught my attention while reading articles from The Athletic, and it comes from reporter Omar Garrick. And Omar covers the Premiership for The Athletic, and he wrote a story coming from the Chelsea Football Club. So I don't know, how familiar are you with Premiership soccer or Premiership football, Jim?
Ted Lasso, that's about it.
All right, excellent. So fictional clubs. Okay. So what Chelsea has done, and it's been one of the more popular clubs worldwide, they've had tons of success in the past couple of decades. They have created a new fan advisory board, short FAB, which they say will, quote, engage in discussion, exchange information, and share insights on matters that affect supporters. And in the article of The Athletic, the board will be made up of 6 supporters, with 3 of these places being reserved for, quote, supporter advisories to the board, end quote. The remaining places will be determined via an application process, which the West London Club have open until March 24th. So for our British fans, if you want to be part of the Chelsea Fan Advisory Board, you have a couple weeks to submit your application. And what Chelsea said in their statement is that they're hoping to be building on successful consultation and engagement mechanisms the club already has in place, that the Fan Advisory Board will engage in discussions, exchange information, and share insights on potential decisions that impact Chelsea supporters. The focus is on the club's strategic vision and objectives, as well as medium and long-term decision-making. I find this to be fascinating, Jim, because you don't see this in professional sports in America. And obviously, with the Premiership soccer clubs, the Premiership football clubs over in England, it's just as or not more tied into the community than what we see like in Chicago with baseball. Like, we know that the Cubs tied to the north side, the White Sox are tied to the south side. In England, it feels like it's on a different level when it comes to the football clubs. And now they're created this fan advisory board. And I think, Jim, the Chicago White Sox should copy this idea. I think the Chicago White Sox should have a fan advisory board.
I wonder who they would pick.
Not us.
Not us. I'm guessing it would be George Jacobs, Kane Guy.
Okay.
Is there a third fan?
Our friend My Sock Summer from the 108, because he loves the marketing department and the marketing department loves him. That's how he gets his bobbleheads.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to think, like, are they too contentious, though?
He's not.
Yeah.
Chorizo and beef
Yeah.
loaf. Maybe. But not my Sox
Okay.
summer. No.
So
3 white dudes. That'll be part of the fan advisory board for the
Yeah.
White Sox. Well, I guess you get 6 members.
yeah. Well, no, I was just trying to think in terms of like who are fans that they've they promote, and just like there would be the 2 I can think of offhands that the White Sox have that we know through White Sox broadcasts, and like the team Jack Ruby, the team dentist. I was just trying to think of like
Who's the insurance guy?
Jeff Vuk. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff Vuk. Jeff Vuk will be part
Yeah.
of the fan advisory board of the White Sox at their pick. The woman that had that consecutive game streak, she was a season ticket holder. I don't know if that streak is continuing. I haven't heard about it recently. I hope so for her sake. But I think that was pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if the pandemic broke it or not, but.
So we've talked about the unresolved anger, and we've talked about how things are not going great between the fans and the organization. I like this idea. I think this would be a step forward to making things better, because I think one of the biggest complaints about the White Sox is they hear you, they don't listen to you. Mm-hmm. The difference between hearing is, yes, we hear you yelling and complaining, but we're not going to do anything about it. With this format, it seems like with Chelsea, they're going to be listening to this board because they're hoping to be getting the type of feedback that, again, decisions that impact the supporters. So when it comes to the stadium or kits or the types of players or the types of people that Chelsea brings on to their executive board, to get that feedback could help mitigate any potential PR disasters. And there's some PR things that are going on across the pond, especially with some clubs trying to sell and who they might be selling to. Here for the White Sox, if they had this fan advisory board, they could get immediate fan reaction, fan feedback, like the pain it is to park at the stadium, the pain it is to get through the stadium, what kind of food we would like to see, these types of things. Like, is it like a test group that you usually have for like movies and commercials that you bring random people in and you show them your commercials and movies and they provide feedback and then you go back and reshoot stuff because it didn't test well? And instead of like that test group, I feel like just having a fan advisory board that you meet with them like 3-4 times during the season, I think it go a long way in getting really good feedback and regaining some trust from the fan base.
Do they not do that as a season ticket holder? Like, I know they've had some events, but like when it comes to like soliciting feedback from, so I'm taking your kind of chuckle as a no.
So the way they get their feedback is ring, ring. Hey, you want to renew your season tickets? No. Oh, why not? And here's the feedback.
Yeah. So it's not like they don't have like check-ins or like, exclusive surveys or anything like that to get an idea of like who their most loyal customers, or what they're thinking and what their experiences are, and what would make it better.
We get the fan surveys, but I don't know if they actually read them. And it's so impersonal to just mass email a bunch of surveys. Did you ever buy a ticket for a White Sox game? Yes. We got your email
that's what I was thinking,
address.
like maybe,
here's a survey.
Yeah, I thought like maybe you had like exclusive surveys, or like you kind of like they sample a cross section of their season ticket holders just to not get 5,000 responses, but maybe see like if there are any commonalities among like 100 responses. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I didn't know if they had any kind of smaller surveys for season ticket holders that might have like a more personal response.
I don't know if it was personal, but I do recall in September getting a fan survey and cross-referencing the other season ticket holders that I know. We all got that survey, but it wasn't personal in the sense of, hey, Josh, what do you think about this? It was just like any of the other fan surveys that the White Sox email out.
Yeah, that seems like a missed opportunity. Like just having, if you're spending the money, and more than the money, the time, for an 81 game slate, or even like, a half season or splitting a full season among a group. Like, you're putting a lot of thought into it. You would think that, they would want to mine those thoughts for just even more data. And they seem like they have a big business analytics department in their front office. I think it might be bigger than their baseball operations department, but it seems like they, have taken efforts with like the dynamic pricing and cutting up their seating chart into a rainbow of colors and tiers. Like they have, you can see the wheels turning in that regard, that they, really are paying attention to what they can charge. But you would think that they would also take that into be like, if they got certain data, they could maybe charge more for that. If they like, here's what an experience, like, add that to a season ticket holder perk, and then, try to sell other people on ticket packages for that perk. But odd.
Yeah. Recently for full season ticket holders, they had an open house to kind of look through the suites and the party areas. And we have a pretty significant discount if I wanted to get a suite in April or in May, because they don't have a lot of the suite spaces sold. So to start the season at least, and maybe that sale will continue on to the summer if those suites are unsold still after the season start. But I kind of like what Chelsea is doing here. Again, if you're trying to build rapport and making it more personal, and going through an application process. So there's more vetting would be going into this fan advisory board than some free agents that the White Sox sign. Maybe even have some type of vote from the fans, or, not trying to make everything political, but, fans could campaign to be part of the fan advisory board. And it would just be an opportunity for these select fans to gain also some clout, to provide and receive feedback online via social media or blogs or etc., and to get that feedback and speak it with face-to-face with White Sox executive members. Because if you're not going to have fan conventions and you're not going to have that many meetups, I think this would be a good opportunity to start rebuilding that trust. So I saw this on The Athletic. Chelsea's doing it. I really like the idea. I think the White Sox should do it. I think even more teams in professional sports in America should do it, because I think it could be a great opportunity to build some rapport with your fan base.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a direct line and like a smaller, group of knowledgeable fans, and knowledgeable just in terms of just like, both knowing about baseball, knowing about the White Sox, but also just kind of knowing how other fans feel, knowing how customers should be treated, whether watching on TV or going to the park. Like, just people who are good at voicing thoughts for how things should be for, certain, team customer relationship. I'm also thinking that like, I would not want to be on that fan advisory board, because I can just imagine like, White Sox Twitter can already be kind of a mess. So just imagine like if something happens, like, oh, you're on the take. Oh, you're, the White Sox have you in their pocket. What are the White Sox giving you that this is what that came out of this? Like, I could just see that being like more trouble than it's worth. Like, I think I'd want to be paid.
I'm sure this is an unpaid gig for Chelsea and the fan board, and it would definitely be unpaid for the White Sox fan advisory board idea. But I like the premise here. I like what Chelsea's doing, and I get your point of view, Jim. If people found out on Twitter you were part of the fan advisory board and things weren't going well, or the White Sox were not spending any money in the offseason, you're going to have people raining down on you, being like, you need to get in front of them. You need to make sure they hear you and they change the way that they work. That probably wouldn't happen. But I think this is a great way to get direct feedback on some things that really impact as far as the fan base, because right now it doesn't seem like the White Sox are doing a very good job listening. They have ways of hearing us, but they're not really implementing any changes to make the experience better at the ballpark. And that's another pretty significant factor when it comes to being a White Sox fan in recent years, not just to play on the field, but also trying to get to the stadium to watch the players play the game. So again, I saw this online. I thought it was a pretty interesting idea. I like the White Sox to do it. They won't do it, but I think it's a good idea. And I look forward to see how it works over in West London with the Chelsea Football Club.
It's nice to know it's possible.
Yeah. Yes. And if you guys know of other fan advisor boards, definitely let us know. To me, this seems new, but maybe it is not new, and you guys know of other examples as well. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. In the next episode of the Sox Machine Podcast, will be coming out on Monday. We're going to be doing more position previews like we did with their in-depth analysis of the White Sox upcoming projected outfield. So we'll be moving over to the infield for the White Sox in our next episode. So you have that to look forward to, and we'll try to recap more of the action that'll be happening in spring training, and also get pumped for the World Baseball Classic because that is coming up. One promotion that I would like to draw your attention to is, again, we're having the watch parties on playback. We had a blast doing the first spring training game with our friends from the 108, and we will be doing some World Baseball Classic games as well. You'll want to circle Sunday night, March 12th on the calendar. This is a late game. It's going to start at 9 p.m. Central Time, but it'll be Mexico against the United States, and we'll be doing that watch party with our friends from the 108. So that's definitely something to look forward to. Again, that's Sunday night on March 12th for the World Baseball Classic game between the United States and Mexico. But if you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow me on Twitter at SoxMachine_Josh. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. And if you enjoy our work and want more, you can help support us over at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where our Patreon supporters get exclusive content. They get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. And when we have new Sox Machine swag in the Sox Machine store, they're the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.